Chosen one, do not rush to respond when your heart is being driven by panic, pain, or an old fear that has always made you believe. Silence means defeat. There are moments when you need to speak in order to defend the truth, establish boundaries, and prevent wrongdoing from causing further harm. But there are also moments when words spoken too soon only leave you more exhausted without bringing the listener any closer to the truth. I am teaching you to distinguish between these two moments. Archangel Michael, the faithful messenger, protector, and executor of my will, reminds you of disciplined strength, not drawing the sword at every sound, not entering every confrontation, but knowing how to remain still, when calmness protects you better than anger. Yet I am the one speaking to you directly. Your voice has value, and precisely because it has value, you do not need to use it for every provocation, every misunderstanding, or every person who has already decided not to listen. There is a kind of silence that is not born from cowardice, but from discernment. It is the moment when you know you could respond, yet choose to wait until your emotions have settled. It is when you are strong enough not to send the message you wrote while wounded. It is when you recognize that the other person is not seeking truth, but only trying to provoke a reaction so that they can later use that reaction against you. Such silence does not erase you. It restores your freedom to choose. It helps you stop living according to the rhythm others impose, stop allowing one remark to disturb your entire day, and stop placing your peace into the hands of those who do not know how to protect it. When you no longer respond immediately, you begin to hear more clearly what truly needs to be said and what should be left for time to reveal. I know there are doors you have tried to open with all your strength. You explained more, did more, proved yourself for longer, and hoped that one day others would admit they had misjudged you. You believed that if you could only find the perfect words, every misunderstanding would disappear. But some doors are not closed because you lack the ability to communicate. They remain closed because the person on the other side is not willing to open them. Some reputations are not restored through an argument, but through the consistency of an upright life. Some rumors cannot be silenced by chasing every person in order to correct them. The more you try to control every story others tell about you, the more you lose the strength needed to build the true story through your actions. Allow time, character, and the way you live to express what self-defense can never fully communicate. Breathe slowly. Perhaps the hallway before you is still quiet. The opportunity has not appeared, and the person you hoped would understand has not changed their perspective. But outward silence does not mean nothing is moving within you. Every time you refuse to react from a wound, you are forming a new kind of strength. Every time you sleep through the night before replying, you are breaking an old pattern. Every time you choose to speak briefly, clearly, and without humiliating another person, you are stepping out of a survival method that once left you exhausted. Great transformation sometimes begins with things so small that no one notices: a message not sent, an argument you chose not to enter, a boundary established without retaliation. I know your throat has grown tired from holding too much. You swallowed tears so others would not feel uncomfortable. You rehearsed conversations in your mind, trying dozens of ways to express yourself in the hope of finding words that would offend no one. You apologized for emotions that were entirely reasonable, apologized for needing time, apologized for being tired, and apologized for no longer being able to give as much as before. You believed that if you explained yourself gently enough and carefully enough, others would have no reason to refuse to listen. Yet there were times when, even after you minimized your needs and softened the truth, until you could barely recognize it, they still heard only what they wanted to hear. Each time, you felt more invisible, as though maintaining outward peace required you to quietly destroy the peace within. That pain is real, and I do not ask you to deny it. Being misunderstood by a stranger is difficult, but being misunderstood by someone you trusted hurts far more deeply. You wondered how someone who had witnessed your heart could doubt your motives, how someone who had received your help could remember only the one time you could no longer continue, and how one small part of the story could be used to define all of who you are. You wanted to open every door, bring out every memory, and prove that you were not what they claimed. But my beloved child, not everyone deserves access to the private storehouse of your deepest experiences. Some people do not ask questions in order to understand. They ask in order to gather more material for a conclusion they have already formed. With such people, the more you explain, the more fragments of your life you hand over to be distorted. I am healing the survival pattern within you that once made you believe you could only be safe if everyone understood you. Perhaps very early in life, you learned that if someone became angry, you had to calm them immediately. If someone doubted you, you had to prove yourself. And if distance appeared in a relationship, you had to be the one to repair it. Because of this, another person's silence made you anxious. A cold response caused you to review everything you had said. Even an unusual look was enough to make you wonder what you had done wrong. You lived too long in a state of vigilance, constantly trying to read the emotions of others in order to protect yourself from abandonment. I do not blame you for learning to survive that way. Perhaps it once helped you endure difficult seasons, but what once protected you does not need to rule your life forever. Peace does not require everyone to agree with you, nor does it require everyone to understand you correctly at once. Genuine peace begins when you know that you have said what needed to be said honestly, accepted responsibility for your part, and stopped trying to control another person's response. You may explain yourself once with respect. You may answer sincere questions. You may apologize when you are truly wrong. But after that, you are allowed to stop. You do not need to reopen the same wound before someone who repeatedly behaves as though they cannot hear. You do not need to spend another hour, another night, or another week preparing a new defense for someone who has already decided not to change their perspective. Silence can become evidence of your growth. In the past, one distorted accusation was enough to keep you awake at night. You imagined countless responses and hoped for the day when you could confront the person and finally say everything. But now you are beginning to realize that not every conversation needs a conclusion. Some people may never offer you the fairness you desire. You can spend years waiting for them to admit the truth, or you can begin healing without their acknowledgement. Freedom comes when you stop allowing those who refuse to understand you to determine how you see yourself. You do not need the judgment within their mind to be reversed before you can know the truth about your own heart and actions. Even so, I do not want you to use silence as a way to avoid responsibility. If you have hurt someone, do not call refusing to respond peace. If something needs to be corrected, face it courageously. Sacred silence is not closing yourself off to every form of feedback, coldly cutting people off, or forcing others to guess what you are thinking. It is not punishment. It does not use absence as a means of control. Healthy silence is accompanied by clarity. You may say, "I need time to think." You may say, "This conversation is no longer respectful, so I am going to stop." You may arrange another time when both sides are calmer. When an apology is needed, apologize. When an explanation is needed, explain. But do not remain endlessly trapped within an argument that no longer has the capacity to produce understanding. In the imaginary courtroom you have repeatedly constructed, in your mind, many voices have spoken. One person questioned your motives, another speculated about your heart, and someone else looked at one decision and treated it as the whole of who you were. You stood there within your thoughts, again and again trying to present evidence. But my beloved child, you do not need to spend your entire life in that room. Walk out. I am not confused about you. I see both what is good and what remains immature. I know where you acted rightly and where you need to change. My understanding is not blind praise. It is a complete, fair, and compassionate view. Therefore, you do not need to deny your mistakes in order to protect your worth. You can say, "I was wrong in this matter," but that does not make everything they say about me true. A restraint has begun to arise within you in the moments when you almost enter an argument. It does not feel like the fear that causes you to shrink, but like a deeper pause. Part of you recognizes that more words will not make the situation clearer. You feel the need to step back, observe, and allow your emotions to cool. Respect that pause. It may be wisdom formed after many years of reacting and regretting. It reminds you that power does not always belong to the person who speaks last. Sometimes, power belongs to the person who possesses enough self-control not to allow anger to make the decision. You do not lose your voice when you choose not to speak yet. You are protecting it so that it can be used at the right time, for the right purpose, and with the weight it deserves. When you feel attacked, begin by separating facts from emotion. What was actually said? Does it have a real effect on your work, your family, your reputation, or anyone's safety? Is the other person willing to have an honest conversation? Is there evidence that needs to be presented? If the matter is serious, seek appropriate support, document the information, and speak the truth clearly and responsibly. But if it is merely a careless remark from someone who does not understand, an online provocation, or an argument with no meaningful destination, you have the right not to participate. Do not surrender an entire day to someone who spent only a few seconds speaking. Without thought, learn to allow some questions to remain unanswered for a while. Allow other people to hold opinions about you that you cannot control. This is difficult, but it frees you from a burden that was never yours. You are responsible for the way you live, the words you speak, and the honesty you maintain. You are not responsible for managing every conclusion in another person's mind. Some people will misunderstand you even after you have done your best. Some will see only what they are capable of seeing. Have compassion for their limitations, but do not turn those limitations into your prison. You also need to forgive those who took one small fragment and called it the entire story. Forgiveness does not erase consequences or require you to trust them again. It simply releases you from the need to keep proving them wrong. You may establish boundaries, correct what needs to be corrected, and continue moving forward. Allow them to take responsibility for the way they use words. Your part is not to use that wound to retaliate against innocent people, not to turn suspicion into a reason to distrust everyone, and not to allow one bad experience to close your heart to healthy relationships. Then forgive yourself for the times when you explained too much. You did so because you wanted to be loved, understood, and able to preserve relationships that mattered to you. Do not mock the person you were then. That person was only using the methods they knew in order to find safety. Today, you understand that peace does not need to be purchased by making yourself smaller. You do not need to apologize for having needs, requiring rest, or refusing to carry responsibilities that do not belong to you. Of course, speak with kindness, but do not construct every sentence only to keep everyone comfortable while you quietly fall apart. My beloved child, the fact that you no longer chase after those who once controlled your emotions as you did before is not evidence that your heart has become cold. It is proof that healing is beginning to reclaim the right to guide your life. There was a time when their silence was enough to cover your entire day in heaviness. One unanswered message, an unusual tone of voice, or a distant look caused you immediately to ask what you had done wrong. You analyzed every word, remembered every action, and tried to repair a problem that you sometimes did not even know truly existed. Archangel Michael, the faithful messenger, protector, and executor of my will, reminds you that courage is not only displayed when facing outward danger, but also in the moment when you stop surrendering control of your peace to another person's attitude. Yet I am the one speaking to you. Love never requires you to remain constantly alert in order to be allowed to stay. You once treated their approval as though it were the air you needed to breathe. When they were pleased with you, everything seemed stable. When they became cold, you immediately lost your direction. You did not merely want to be loved. You believed you had to continually prove that you deserved love. Because of this, you tried to anticipate their needs, yielded even when you were hurt, and apologized for things that were not your fault. You believed that if you were gentle enough, patient enough, and useful enough, they would not leave. But love sustained by fear is not a place where you can rest. When you must sacrifice truth, your voice, and your dignity to keep someone near, you are no longer preserving the relationship. You are gradually losing yourself. I do not blame you for having lived that way. Perhaps it was how you learned to survive, avoid conflict, or preserve a sense of safety during years, when you did not yet know that you could be loved without diminishing yourself. Now you are beginning to feel a new distance forming. The person who once could pull you into a spiral with a single attitude can no longer do so as easily. You still notice changes in their voice and still feel pain when they withdraw. But a deeper part of you has begun to say, I will not chase after them as I did before. This may confuse you. You wonder whether you are becoming uncaring, proud, or unloving. But my beloved child, calmness is not coldness. The fact that you no longer beg for attention does not mean you no longer care. It only means you are learning that sincere affection should never have to be purchased through self-humiliation. You can remain open, ask questions, and create opportunities for conversation, but you do not need to pursue someone who uses silence as a tool of control. You can love them without making their mood the center of your life. Healing is loosening the hooks that fear once drove deeply into you. One hook was called fear of abandonment. Another was called fear of being misunderstood. Another was called fear that someone would be disappointed if you established a boundary. Each time they became silent, those hooks once pulled you back into old habits. Sending another message, explaining more, apologizing again, and accepting responsibility for matters the other person needed to face themselves. But now, before you act, a pause has appeared. Within that pause, you begin asking, am I truly wrong? Am I trying to bring clarity, or am I only afraid of losing them? Is this person speaking with me respectfully? These questions do not make you less sincere. They prevent you from betraying yourself merely to preserve a sense of closeness that is not safe. Remember that forgiveness does not require you to return. There are people you may release from resentment without restoring them to their former place. You may pray that they heal, mature, and find peace. But this does not mean you must remain within reach of behaviors that repeatedly wounded you. Forgiveness means laying down the desire for revenge. Trust must be rebuilt through consistency. These are not the same thing. You may forgive today and still need much time to observe. You may no longer feel angry and still recognize that the relationship is not healthy enough to continue. Do not allow others to use forgiveness as a key that forces you to open every door. I do not call you to nurture hatred, but neither do I call you to return to a place where no genuine change has occurred. You can care without granting someone authority over your peace. You can listen to them without accepting the responsibility to solve everything. You can have compassion for their pain, while still saying that the way they treat you is unacceptable. Some people will tell you about their past wounds as an explanation for their present behavior. Listen with compassion, but do not confuse an explanation with freedom from accountability. Their pain may help you understand why they behave as they do, but it does not make hurting you right. Mature love contains both compassion and limits. It does not only ask, what have they been through? It also asks, what is this relationship producing within me, and are both of us willing to change? I know you still feel the injustice. When others distort your intentions, speak without understanding, or treat your heart as though it has no value, the pain still rises in your chest. Healing does not turn you into stone. It does not remove your emotions or make you incapable of being hurt. What is changing is the distance between feeling and action. In the past, you felt pain and reacted immediately. Now you can feel pain and still wait. You can notice anger rising without allowing it to seize your words. This is significant growth, even though it is quiet. You do not need to deny emotion in order to become strong. You only need to remember that emotion is a messenger, not a ruler. It has something to tell you, but it does not always have the right to decide what you will do. The pause before reacting is mercy at work within you. It shows mercy to you because it prevents you from speaking words that would keep you awake for many nights afterward. It also shows mercy to the other person because it prevents your wound from creating another wound. Imagine a gatekeeper standing before your words. This guardian does not silence you or force you to endure everything quietly. The guardian simply asks, is this necessary? Is this the right moment? Are you speaking to heal or to punish? If the answer is not yet clear, the gate remains closed a little longer. That waiting does not weaken the truth. It helps the truth to be expressed in a form your conscience can remain peaceful about afterward. Your former self often reacted quickly because you believed that if you did not respond at once, the other person would win, false words would become truth, or your silence would be interpreted as an admission. But my beloved child, speed is not always faithfulness to truth. Sometimes, speed is only the expression of panic. You responded before understanding the whole situation, sent messages before examining your feelings, and made decisions before considering consequences. Then, after anger passed, you had to deal with what had been created during a few impulsive minutes. I am teaching you a new rhythm. Slow down so you can see clearly, pause so you can discern, and speak only after your words have been purified of the desire to wound. Growth does not take away your voice. It makes your voice more trustworthy. Noise is not always truth. A person may speak loudly and still be wrong. A crowd may agree and still fail to see the whole story. You do not need to raise your voice in order to increase your worth. Some truths are communicated through one brief statement, a clear boundary, or a calm decision to leave a place where respect is absent. When you know who you are, you do not need to turn every disagreement into a battle to prove your dignity. You can correct false information, defend the innocent, and speak against injustice without becoming a reflection of those who are doing wrong. Truth does not need cruelty in order to survive. It can stand through clarity, evidence, and a consistent life. I want you to learn when to remain silent and when to speak. If a conversation is sincere, participate. If the other person truly wants to understand, explain. If you were wrong, admit it without evasion. If silence would allow someone else to continue being harmed, speak courageously. But if you stand before someone who only wants to provoke you, twist every word, or make you lose control, so they can gather more reasons to condemn you, you have the right to step away. Healthy silence is not avoiding responsibility, nor is it a cold form of punishment. It can be accompanied by a clear statement. This conversation is no longer respectful, so I am stopping. You do not need to disappear in order to make someone panic. Leave transparently and return when both sides are calm enough. If returning is still necessary, some people may dislike the new version of you. They were accustomed to your immediate explanations, your fear of their silence, and your habit of chasing after them whenever they withdrew. When you no longer participate in that pattern, they may call you cold, changed, or selfish. Do not quickly believe those names. Examine your behavior honestly. Are you being disrespectful, using distance as revenge, or refusing a necessary conversation? If so, make corrections. But if you are simply establishing healthy boundaries, do not allow another person's discomfort to pull you back into your former dependence. Those who benefited from your lack of boundaries often resist when boundaries appear. Their resistance does not automatically mean you are wrong. I know guilt may arise after you say no. You wonder whether you were too harsh, whether you made someone sad, or whether you destroyed a relationship that should have been saved. Remember that a boundary does not destroy a healthy relationship. It reveals relationships that could survive only while you continually yielded. Someone who genuinely loves you may need time to adjust, but they will care about your needs. They may feel disappointed, but they will not use disappointment to punish you. They will not force you to choose between dignity and closeness. Do not confuse another person's strong reaction with evidence that you did something wrong. Sometimes you are simply touching a privilege they once possessed in your life. Forgive the former version of yourself who reacted too quickly. That person was not weak. They simply lived with a deep fear that they could be abandoned at any time. You tried to keep people through the methods you knew: explaining, pleasing, yielding, and accepting blame. Do not use today's wisdom to despise the person you were then. Place your hand over your heart and tell yourself that you no longer need to live that way. Someone can be disappointed in you, and you can still be safe. You can be misunderstood and still possess value. You can allow someone to leave without chasing after them, to prove that you deserve to be kept. Healing begins when you become a safe place for yourself. And stop abandoning yourself whenever you fear that someone else may leave. Forgive those who once controlled your emotions, while also recognizing that not everything they did was necessarily deliberate. Some people never learned healthy communication and therefore use silence. Some grew up in environments where love was always conditional. Some do not know how to process emotions, so they withdraw, become cold, or react harshly. This understanding may reduce bitterness within you, but it does not require you to continue tolerating harmful behavior. You can view them with compassion, while still saying that the pattern must end. You can hope that they learn to love more healthily without offering your peace as an unlimited place for them to practice. From today, whenever you feel triggered, begin with one small action. Place your feet on the ground, breathe in slowly, and name the emotion accurately. I am afraid of being abandoned. I feel misunderstood. I am angry because my boundary was ignored. When you name the feeling correctly, it loses some of its power. Then ask what you truly need. An explanation, a pause, a boundary, or support from someone trustworthy. Do not immediately run to the very person who triggered the wound and ask them to make you calm. Learn to regulate yourself first, and only then decide which conversation needs to take place. This does not make you distant. It helps you enter relationships as someone capable of standing, not as someone begging another person to return their breath. My beloved child, you are becoming someone who waits for pure guidance before acting. This does not mean you will never make mistakes. There will be times when you still react, speak too quickly, or chase someone because an old fear has risen again. When that happens, do not conclude that all progress has disappeared. Pause, accept responsibility, and return. Healing is not a straight line. One weekday does not erase the months in which you have grown. What matters is that you recognize the pattern more quickly, repair the damage sooner, and no longer remain trapped within the cycle. I do not require perfection. I invite you to become increasingly honest, discerning, and responsible. Let peace become your anchor rather than another person's response. When someone becomes silent, you do not need to panic immediately. Give them space while continuing to live your life. Continue your work, care for your health, speak with sincere people, and do what gives your life meaning. Do not sit before one closed door and forget that there is an entire house waiting to be lived in. If the person wants to communicate, they can return with clarity. If they are using distance as manipulation, your calmness will prevent the pattern from continuing to work. You cannot control their behavior, but you can decide that it will no longer destroy your entire day. Now courageously release relationships held together by fear. Release the need to please everyone. Release the habit of apologizing for reasonable needs. Release the desire to explain until someone who does not want to understand finally changes. Forgive them, forgive yourself, and allow the lesson to remain without carrying bitterness. You can love without begging, forgive without returning, and care without surrendering control. This is not separation from love. It is love purified of fear. Continue with the calm courage Michael represents, while always allowing my gentleness to lead you. When you need to speak, speak clearly without humiliating. When you need to wait, wait without condemning yourself. When you need to leave, leave without revenge. When someone genuinely changes, examine the possibility with wisdom instead of closing your heart out of pride. And when you recognize that a relationship can survive only if you lose yourself, be strong enough to lay it down. I want you to return to gratitude. Give thanks because you are learning what you were never taught before. Give thanks because peace is becoming stronger than the urge to chase. Give thanks because you still possess the ability to love after everything you have endured, but now that love is accompanied by wisdom. Continue living kindly, but do not forget yourself. Keep your heart tender, but do not allow everyone to enter without responsibility. Listen to emotion, but let truth decide your actions. Every time you pause before repeating an old reaction, you are opening a new future. In that future, you are no longer controlled by silence, tone of voice, or another person's approval. You stand firmly in love, knowing how to forgive, how to establish boundaries, and how to recognize that your peace is something precious that must be cared for every day.